is it that you feel like you have to eat clean? And what do you believe would be true about yourself if you didn't?
Right.
What we believe that would be true about us is going to reveal a lot about what actually needs to be healed. And it's usually stories that say things like, I'm more worthy when I'm thin, or I get more love and attention when I'm in a certain body.
Put up your mask, let down your guard, and let's talk about the real. This is the Bring Your Own Mask podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. My guest today is Molly Seifert. She is a body image coach and a mentor, and she really helps women learn how to radically love themselves and their bodies. I'm so excited to bring her on. She is really someone that has made it her life's mission to really step into this power and goodness of helping women embody who they really are, authentically are, and not have to feel obsessed with their weight. Welcome to the show, Molly.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you are here. Oh my goodness. I was just looking at your Instagram before we hopped on, and I noticed that you had this post about the comparison trap, judgment versus curiosity. And I really wanted to pick your brain and dive deeper into what you meant by that post.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've been hearing this so much recently. And honestly, it sparked a lot of curiosity within me, because sometimes I'm like, I don't have the answer to that. Sometimes my clients will ask and I'm like, I really don't have the answer to that, right? So then I'm like, I need to dive deeper into this. And so really this was fueled by, I was having a lot of clients who were like, yeah, my inner circle really loves me. They don't judge me, X, Y, and Z, but I'm more concerned about my outer circle and the general public. And I'm like, why is it that we care so much about what everyone thinks, right? Because when we developed, right, it was important for us to be accepted by our tribe and our community for survival, right? So you would think that as we developed, that it was still just important for our like inner circle to love and accept us. But for some reason, we've evolved to believe that we need everyone to love and accept us. And so this is a little bit of a jaunt from that post, and we'll get back to that. What I've come to find is that people are looking for acceptance and belonging, but really what our human desire underneath that is for power. And I'm sure you have probably done a lot of work around power, right? But what we really want when we think of power, I think people think of the popular one, the person in charge. So that's more like power over people. But really what most humans are craving is that power within. And what that really is personal freedom, right? And so that's kind of what I've found, that like, that's really what we're going for. When we think, I want everybody to love and accept me, actually what you really want is personal freedom. And so that post was about, can we shift from judgment to curiosity? Curiosity saying things like, I'm noticing myself comparing myself to Kristen, or I'm noticing myself comparing myself to that person. And instead of saying, I'm not good enough, they're better than me, or sometimes even judging them, like, who are they to do that, right? And instead asking, what is it that I believe that they have that I don't? And what that helps us uncover is some of our core desires, right? My favorite example of this is I had a client who gained some weight during her marriage, and she has this belief that people are saying, oh, poor so-and-so, her partner, poor him, because she has gained so much weight.
Yeah.
And so then I asked her, okay, what is it that you believe that these people who have thin, societally attractive bodies, what do you believe that those couples have that you don't have right now? And she was like, passion. And I was like, that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
You don't want thinness, you want passion. So how can we create more passion in your relationship between you and your partner? Because that's really at the root of this comparison and this judgment and this shame, is really just information to lead us to this inner knowing of like, hey, we want some more passion in this relationship. So that post is really about using that comparison that we find ourselves doing as information to get down to the core of like what we actually want, or maybe what we don't want, right? It's all really good information that we can take in. And if we are able to shift from judgment to curiosity, we can get down to that core information. And that is so powerful when we know that. To kind of circle it back to the first thing about personal freedom, when we know what our core desires are, that's when we can get that personal freedom. That's when we can step towards that, because we can absolutely fulfill all of those needs and all of those relational needs in our own life.
Yeah, and I love that example that you used of your client because I feel like a lot of people are not very conscious of why they want something, whether that is their body image or whether why they want more money, right? It's really kind of like this external thing that people want, but they don't really know why. What is that deeper intention? And so I love that example because it made me realize that a lot of my own clients and everyone that's listening, right, that they probably want, let's say, like 5K months or 10K months, or they want like a really nice slim body, but really it's not that external thing. It's something deeper. And that's what I'm really excited to get to talk about today. So actually, if you don't mind, I really want to put down our guards now, put up our mask, and let's talk about that real. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it for sure. And I love that you mentioned so many clients and we have to get to the deeper thing. And yeah, I'm good at that around body image. But recently I was talking to my partner about money and how I want to just be a little bit more conscious of it. And I wanted to save some more. And he was like, well, why do you want to save? And it was so helpful to just lay it out and be like, oh, these are actually the reasons. Money's one way to get there, but I can also start doing more things in my life to get there as well. So.
Yeah. And I love that because every time we talk about these things, we always think that it's one subject, but it's really interconnected, right? Like body image connects with money, connects with your relationship, etc. So since we have our mask on, I really want to ask you, how did you get into becoming a body image coach? Can you share with us your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So with many coaches, a big part of it is my own story. So I am a lifelong perfectionist, a recovering perfectionist now, if you will, and a people pleaser. And it's interesting doing this mask thing because I now realize how like my entire life until I was like mid-20s, I was putting on a performance, right? I saw this idea of, what I was told and led to believe that life was supposed to look like. So I pursued that. I got that. And then I was like, oh shit, I'm not happy. And so a big part of that perfectionism and people pleasing for me, the food part, the body part, started at a point in my life where I felt like I was losing that image of perfection. And I turned to my body to control it because I felt like I no longer had control. And so I said, okay, well, this is probably something I control. Let me focus on that. And I'll kind of give the backstory of that as well. Again, I was pursuing what I thought I was supposed to do. Go get a good degree, go get an advanced degree, really be elite in your career. So my previous career, I was an athletic trainer and I just really excelled up that ladder very quickly. Went to a really top school and I got to the school and was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not passionate about this. So there was many things happening in my life at this time. I got some eye gels because,
Oh my gosh. Did you read my mind? I have this too.
Oh my God, amazing. There was many things happening. I call it a quarter life crisis. Brene Brown would call it an awakening. And it really was an awakening, right? But like at the time it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not happy. My family life, there was a situation going on between me and my parents that was very unhealthy and very stressful. I was in a relationship that we had talked about marriage. And honestly, now looking back, people would ask, are you guys going to get married? And I said, well, yeah, that's the plan, right? Yeah. Not like, yes, I'm so excited to marry this person. I was like, no, that's the plan. That's the next step, right? Now is a real big clue to me, like, oh, that wasn't a good fit, but that was how my whole life was. It was like, this is the next step. And so I got halfway through grad school. I was like, my family life isn't going well. This relationship that I'm in is not going well. He basically was like, let's get married. And then was like, just kidding, I'm out. Basically just like stopped trying. I didn't want to do my career path anymore. And so again, I was like, okay, everything that I built around me, this big giant mask, this performance was crumbling around me. And so I decided that I was going to lose a few pounds. And mind you, at the time, I was about 30 pounds lighter than I am now. And I wanted to get down to this weight that was just like so arbitrary. And like, what was that going to do for me? But I was so determined that when I lost that weight, I was then going to be happy. And when you think about it, all of the marketing shows these like really quote unquote happy people in thin bodies, right? So you think that when you get that body or a version of your body that's going to be smaller, right, that's going to equal happiness. And what happened is I became so obsessed with calories. I was trying to eat only 1,200 calories a day. First of all, that's not enough for any adult woman. That's like the amount that a toddler needs. But mind you, at the time, I was an athletic trainer, so I'm on my feet all day. I was living in Oregon, and it's just easier to ride your bike there. So I was riding my bike to work, and I was training for half marathons. So my energetic need was probably at least more than twice of what I was trying to limit myself to. And so what I fell into, and many people do when they start to restrict their calories, is the restrict binge cycle. So I would restrict during the day, and then I would end up binging at night because I wasn't eating enough. And then I felt like crap, felt like a failure. It was like, tomorrow, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then I would restrict again tomorrow. I would fail again. And so I fell really deep into this binge restrict cycle. And I had a friend who had an eating disorder in college. And I was talking to her about this weight loss, completely oblivious that I should not have been talking to her about this, but luckily she had done her own healing. And it took a couple times for it to really sink into me. But eventually she was like, Molly, it sounds like a really disordered relationship to food. And I really encourage you to go seek some help. And that's when I realized that if I didn't already have an eating disorder, I was on my way to having an eating disorder.
Yeah.
So I got some help. I went to therapy for a while. But then when I gave myself permission to eat food, I gained weight. And at the time, I didn't know about intuitive eating. I didn't know about body acceptance. So I got really uncomfortable that I gained weight. And then I fell into 4 to 5 years of obsession around clean eating, which honestly, it was longer and it was sneakier because being obsessed with clean eating is really praised in our society. And so people started to see me as this health martyr. Everyone was always like, you have so much self-control, you're so healthy all the time, X, Y, and Z. And it started off as a pretty innocent thing, but it snowballed into me isolating myself. I no longer went out to dinner with girlfriends because I was like, well, I'm not going to be drinking alcohol because I don't drink alcohol, and there's nothing on this menu that I can eat. So I started to isolate myself. All I could think about all the time was food, and it really consumed my life to the point where I was in this little box of obsessing about food all of the time. And so then I thought, well, how about I teach people how to be healthy, right? And I got my health coaching certification.
Yeah.
And in that time period, I started coaching some people around health with that same idea of we need to eat healthy all the time, and clean eating is the answer to all your food obsession, when really I was still obsessed. But during that time, I learned about intuitive eating, and it kind of all just clicked for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need this for myself. And I also need to teach this to other women. So I dove in myself, really embraced the intuitive eating approach. And then I started coaching women on intuitive eating. And what I found during that time was that body image was really the thing that was the sticking point. They were like, I get the food thing, but now my body's changed and I'm really uncomfortable. So what I was doing basically for 2 years was coaching women on body image. And so finally, about a year ago, I was like, I'm just going to shift to just talking about body image because I love talking about it. I'm really passionate about it. And it's really where I see the biggest breakthroughs with my clients. So that's the long version of the story of how I started coaching on body image.
Well, I love this story because I think that most people know clean eating, right? Or healthy eating. You got to eat healthy, but no one really knows about intuitive eating, right? It's not something that is talked about on television, for example. We're at this time in our society where we know that it's good to eat healthy, but we don't know what intuitive eating is. So for those people that are new to intuitive eating, can you explain more about, it's kind of self-explanatory. I feel like you can describe it much better.
Yeah. So the short definition of intuitive eating is it's a non-diet approach to health and wellness. Okay. So I think a lot of people hear intuitive eating and then they think of what's going to happen when they first intuitively eat, and that's to eat all of the things that they were restricting, right? So then they assume that intuitive eating means I'm going to be eating pizza and ice cream and French fries and whatever 24/7, because that's obviously what I'm going to always want. And there is a period of, if you're coming from diet culture and you're shifting to intuitive eating, there is going to be a period of time where your body and your brain are going to naturally crave those things that you're restricted. This restriction is what creates the obsession. So when you start to give yourself permission to eat all of those foods, it's called habituation. So we're like, I want pizza, I want pizza, I want pizza. And then one day you're like, I actually don't want pizza. What do I want? And you just
Yeah.
get curious about what is it that I want? And so what you find with intuitive eating is that when you can create a relationship with your body again, which is what we're naturally meant to do, some days it will be craving a salad. I will never forget so clearly. I was just like, I just want a kale Caesar salad because that's what I want right now is a kale Caesar salad.
Right.
So there's going to be times where you're craving these salads and nutrient dense foods, but there's also going to be times where you're like, man, I just got a hankering for pizza and I'm going to go ahead and give myself that. And part of it too is there is an element, it's the last principle, and it's called gentle nutrition. And it's about finding how can I nourish my body both with nutrients, but also with pleasure and satisfaction, and finding that balance for you and supporting your health. So yes, is there a phase where you're going to want to eat the things that you used to restrict? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But when you're able to connect with your body in a way where you're listening to it, it's going to send signals for all sorts of things: salads, fruits, oatmeal, veggies. Like sometimes you're like, I just want a raw vegetable right now, right? And you're able to listen to your body in a way that diet culture doesn't support, because it's like, this is what you're supposed to eat, this is when you're supposed to eat, this is how much. And so it is a process because we lose some of those signals in dieting. And so we have to get reconnected with those.
And I love that you say that, right? Because the thing is that this brings me to think about how it not only applies to diet culture, but it also applies to even like productivity. We're both entrepreneurs. So like there's this idea that you always have to be working, or like you always have to be productive. Because if you are like watching reality TV, that must mean that like you're not working as hard as the other person. So it's almost as if what I'm hearing from you is that in the past, it was very extreme, right? You're either very clean or you're like eating really dirty or whatever, but rather it's kind of staying in that middle ground of being balanced and intuitive. So for people that struggle with, let's say, this internal guilt, right? Of like, okay, I have to be eating super clean all the time. What would you say to them?
Yeah. My question would be just curiosity, right? Like, why is it that you feel like you have to eat clean? And what do you believe would be true about yourself if you didn't? Because that's going to really reveal the core wound that's fueling this obsession, right? So if you didn't eat clean, what would be true about you? Or what do you believe would be true about you? Because chances are it wouldn't actually be true about you. But what we believe that would be true about us is going to reveal a lot about what actually needs to be healed. And it's usually stories that say things like, I'm more worthy when I'm thin, or I get more love and attention when I'm in a certain body, right? Yeah. And you might have some stories that supported that in the past, and that's why you started to do that. And so those are the things that need to be healed. And if there is some real trauma around that, then I would absolutely suggest going to therapy, because that's so important. If there's like real trauma around these stories, therapy is absolutely going to be the thing that's going to help you there.
I had this question I wanted to ask you and I totally forgot it, and now it's come back. When someone is going through, let's say, a bad relationship with food, or have a food disorder, again, I haven't been in that position, but I almost feel like I see people go through that situation. Do they know personally? And how did you know that you had a food disorder and that you needed to change? Isn't there levels of, let's say, like, I don't even realize I have a food disorder?
Yeah, I think there's a couple answers to this question. One, I like to think of relationship to food as a spectrum. So there's the people that have a completely normal, healthy, balanced relationship to food, meaning that they don't spend too much time thinking about it. They enjoy food, they eat food, they move on with their life. Yeah. Then on the other end, we have people who have clinically diagnosable eating disorders. So binge eating disorder, bulimia, anorexia, orthorexia, which is now a clinically diagnosable eating disorder. And then there's a bunch of like not otherwise specified, right? So we have the people that have that clinical diagnosis, but then we have everyone in the middle, right? And that's where most people live, honestly, is in this spectrum between totally normal around eating and clinically diagnosable. So if you have something that's clinically diagnosable, that's probably going to be really, well, not always, but it's going to be probably pretty obvious to the people around you. You're isolating a ton, you're never eating, you have interesting habits around food, but the in-between is kind of sneaky. And everyone on the spectrum deserves help and support with whatever they're going through. If you have something that's clinically diagnosable, my suggestion would be to get a team of support. So a therapist, a nutritionist, whatever you need to do, maybe a psychiatrist. So if you need to get on any medication, right? But if you're somewhere in between, you also deserve help. And so some keys that you might be having a disordered relationship to food and your body, first and foremost, is constantly thinking and worrying about it, right? So thinking about, okay, I just ate, how many calories did I eat? When's the next kind of time I can eat? What am I going to eat so I can stay within my calorie thing, X, Y, and Z, right? If you are unable to go to a barbecue or party or wedding and not worry about the food, that's a good sign. Because if you're planning ahead outside of like, maybe you have, Crohn's disease or celiac disease, then you really do have to plan for your health, right? So if you're constantly obsessing about food, if you're constantly worrying and planning ahead, and there's not like a true medical reason to, if you're doing a lot of body checking in the mirror, if you're like constantly scrutinizing and picking apart your body, that's a really good sign. So those are probably the top 3, I would say, that are like really obvious. Also, if you're exercising only for the purpose of making your body smaller.
Wow. Okay. It's funny because I never thought of it in this spectrum, right? Like I always thought of it as just one end to the other, but never in between space. And I feel like there's so many people that, you may be listening now that you are struggling with it, but you don't know how to even articulate what it is that you're struggling with when it comes to your body image, food, which actually I'm excited about, because now I really want to actually take off our mask and dig deeper, if you don't mind, Molly. I really want to kind of pick your brain on, how you got to where you are today. Obviously, I know that we talked a little bit about that, but let's talk deeper, right? Let's talk about fears and limiting beliefs.
Totally. Yeah.
Molly, I'd love to talk to you about your limiting beliefs. All of us have it, obviously. And since we're taking off our masks right now, I want to get vulnerable, super vulnerable with you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you still struggle with certain limiting beliefs around your own body?
Oh, yeah. 100%. I always tell this to people. And so this isn't super vulnerable, but maybe we'll find something vulnerable here, is that I think people assume that when you work on your body image, you'll get to a place where like you love your body every day. And I'm like, no. Maybe if we lived in a society that didn't value fitness, maybe you could get there, but we don't. The fact of the matter is that we don't live in a society that does that. So what we have to do is we have to manage our internal boundaries around that. Of course, there's some external boundaries that you can work on as well, but there's absolutely times where I'm like, I don't like how my body feels. I don't like how my body looks. Yeah. And the difference between what happens with me versus what happens with people who haven't done the work is how I manage those feelings and expectations, right? Do I fall into a shame spiral, or do I allow myself to feel that discomfort and then move on, right? And that's usually what I do. I don't know if I necessarily have tip of the iceberg limiting beliefs that are easy to find through body image anymore, but I will say my biggest limiting belief around my body was, and this seeps into other areas of life because it's not just about body image, right? Sure. Is that if I gain weight, people will think that I'm a failure or not good enough, or they'll somehow be disappointed in me. Disappointment is like my biggest wound. And so when I was starting my business, I was like, well, what if I fail at this? And I really had to get comfortable with the idea of like, if I fail at this, I'll be able to move on. But that disappointment wound was like, well, people around me are going to be disappointed in me if I fail at this business. And I think for me, and what I try to encourage people is not to say, okay, well, how can I make it so that I never fail and that I'm never disappointed? It's like, no, we actually have to get comfortable with the discomfort that disappointment brings, because the fact of the matter is that I cannot remove disappointment from my life. I can't.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I am getting vulnerable and sharing the range that this wound around disappointment spans, it's everything, right? So I'm now in a new partnership, and my partner, he's amazing. And I'm finding myself having to navigate disappointments that come up. And granted, at this point, they're still like small, but because my wound is so big around disappointments, those are the first things that I see, right? So I'm having to really manage, okay, I feel disappointed in this moment. Does that mean that he's not a good fit? No, absolutely not. I know that to be true, but I can also sit with and be with the disappointment in this moment.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what a lot of people will ask then is, how do you sit with disappointment, right? Because what you said about your biggest limiting belief, it's so interesting because I feel like most people think that once you reach a certain level, you don't have limiting beliefs anymore, right? And then we tend to be scared to talk about our limiting beliefs because we're like, okay, well, all these people are following me. That must mean that I have to be at this certain level. And so can you share with people, how can they get comfortable knowing that they can share these limiting beliefs about themselves and still be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the work that I still have to do for myself, because like you said, people think that when you get to that next level that you don't have these challenges anymore. But the truth is, new levels, new devils, right? And really it's probably going to be the same devil, just with a new different flavor. So how do I sit with disappointment? So this is what I have learned to do. And part of it has taken time and practice and intentionality. There's two big pieces to this work in my mind. Is one, validating and being with that emotion, saying something like, I'm noticing some disappointment right now. I feel it wherever in my body, right? I usually feel things in my chest. So I feel this tightness in my chest, and it's okay to feel that way. So really validating and making it okay that that emotion is there, because what that does is it teaches our nervous system that this doesn't mean we have to run away. This is just information, right? Most people's nervous systems are like, ooh, big uncomfortable emotion, let's go do something to escape this.
Yeah.
Right? So what part of this work is reconditioning our nervous system to be like, oh, I can feel this thing and know that I'm okay, so I don't have to go into a stress response, whatever that looks like for you. The other part is really managing what thoughts are happening, right? So with body, right? If you're noticing, I feel really disappointed in my body today, then you can get clear on, okay, what does that mean? Right? When I say I'm disappointed in my body, what's so bad about that? What's so bad about being disappointed in my body? And again, asking, and what does that mean about me? Right?
Yeah.
So really getting clear on the thoughts and then figuring out what's that core wound and then reframing and rewiring that. Because I think a lot of times people try to rewire the more superficial stuff, which it has its value. But if we can rewire and reframe the core stuff, what we'll get down to is something about disappointment again. So something that I've reframed and rewired to is, it's okay for me to be disappointed. I will be safe in disappointment. So in those moments, that's what I'm now repeating to myself. But for someone who's new to it, we have to do that work and kind of sifting through those thoughts to figure out what's really at the core of this and how can we rewire that, and also say a reframe that actually feels true to you in the moment, right? So I've done a lot of work around this, so I can say it's safe to feel disappointed. But earlier on, I had to say things like, I'm learning that it's okay to feel disappointed. I'm in the process of seeing that it's safe to feel disappointed. So that it's kind of that bridge between like, if this feels uncomfortable, I'm disappointed, I need to run away, bridging us to, okay, it's okay to feel disappointed, if that makes sense.
Because like, here's the thing, right? Like, you're absolutely right. Most people's nervous system is designed where something uncomfortable happens and they immediately have to do something to either run away or to like fix it or whatever the case may be, because they're not comfortable sitting with that discomfort. So for some people that are literally just starting out and they just have never even sat with like discomfort before, you know, what are some of like just tips on how can they even get started?
Yeah, the first tip I always tell people to do is, you don't have to sit with it. You don't have to do an emotional embodiment meditation, which is my favorite thing to do when I'm sitting with emotion. You can just say, I'm noticing myself feel some sort of way. I'm noticing this feeling. So just start to say out loud, validate it, call it out, so that you just start to, I still have the mask on my face. So it's really distracting me. So anyway, the first step I would always say is to just call it out, name it, validate it, say it out loud that like, I'm noticing this. Then you can move on. You can still go do whatever you were going to do, right? You can still run away from that. You can still, you know, emotionally eat. You can still numb out, whatever you do, right? But it is a step. It is absolutely progress to say, I'm feeling some sort of way. I'm noticing a tightness in my chest. I'm noticing a closing of my throat. I'm noticing this like deep feeling in my gut or my belly, right? So calling it out, if you can name it, if you can say, I'm noticing frustration, I'm noticing sadness, I'm noticing whatever, a feelings wheel can be really helpful for that. Call it out or name it. Just say what you're feeling in your body. Or if you're not good at those two things, just say, I'm feeling some sort of way and I don't know what it is, and that's okay. Right? Yeah. Always trying to end with, and that's okay. I'm feeling some sort of way, and that's okay. I'm noticing a tightness in my chest, and that's okay. And then move on with your life. I think that is the absolute first step when people are like, I don't want to sit with it yet. That's too uncomfortable. That's okay. It's normal for you to be like, I don't want to take that step yet. So I think the first step is calling it out, naming it, noticing what's in your body.
Yeah. And this whole conversation has been so great in the sense that you're not teaching people to be extreme, right? You're literally teaching people to be intuitive with their bodies. And
yes.
I feel like this relates to so many things in our life. Like, I mean, obviously this topic is about body image, but everything is interconnected, right? And this has been so insightful for me to even think about how people look at money or how people look at their relationships, right? Like if you're trying to be too perfect in your relationship, it's not natural, right? You want to be intuitive on how you are interacting with your partner. So for listeners that want to follow you and see what you're up to, what kind of projects are you working on this year that they can be involved in?
Yeah. So I spend all of my time on Instagram. So that's where you're going to find me, be able to absorb all of the good knowledge. But project wise, gosh, I feel like there's always a million projects going on. My main offering that I do is I have a group program for body image, but I'm also kind of in the works of creating a more passive thing that people can do on their own time. So that's a project that I'm working on. I also now work with professionals to help mentor them so that they can teach their clients about body image tools and that kind of stuff. So if you're a professional, I have resources for that as well. But if you're new to the space and you have an idea of something that you would like to see, I'm always open to ideas and hearing what you think would be helpful, whether it be a membership or, something like that. So I'd just love to hear ideas as well. But there's always a million ideas swirling around in my head. And there's only so much things that I can put to action, but that's what's going on right now.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, this conversation has just been so enlightening, especially for me, right? I decided to especially invite you on the show because I honestly have never really struggled with body image to that point. But just recently, I've just been seeing so many people go through that. And I really feel like more people need to learn about intuitive eating. And I knew that you would be the perfect person to talk to, about and kind of share your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge, as well as your group coaching program. So for those of you guys that are listening, if you want to learn more about Molly, her links are just down in the description below, but just definitely check her out. She has such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to body image and also just mindset around your body and how you are supposed to really be living intuitively. And there's not a supposed to, but just really sitting with that discomfort and being joy with life. So yeah. Molly, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope I have you back on the podcast soon.
Thanks so much for having me. It was super fun.